An object reference.
An object reference to an object that or an object from a class that implements the action listener interface, right? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to hit enter because I want you to see, in fact, for right now, I'm going to actually move this over a little bit. Will it let me? Yeah, I'm going to do this because we're doing some very strange stuff and I need to separate these things to make it make sense. So here is the strange stuff that we're going to do. Okay. What in the heck is this doing? It's not functional programming, but it's close. In fact, it's the gateway drug to functional programming, right? This, if you understand this, then taking the next step into functional programming also will make some sense, right? It will make more sense, I should say. So what in the world am I doing with this action listener thing, right? I am instantiating a new object that is of a class that implements the action listener interface, but the class has no name. The class has no name. It's called an anonymous inner class because it has no name. We don't really care about the name anyway. As long as it works in this one place, we don't care. We're not going to refer to that name again. So this is saying create a new object from an anonymous inner class that implements an action listener. Notice the word implements doesn't appear, right? So it is kind of odd looking. If I am making this new thing, I'm actually writing the class code right here, right? I'm writing the class code. So what does that class code need to have in it? What's the requirement for an action listener? What's the method that must exist for this to correctly implement the action listener interface? Public void action perform. What does it take? It takes whatever you want to call it. It takes an action event, right? And E or action event, whatever you want to call this thing, doesn't matter, right? So it's a variable. And then what do we want to do? And now here is where we put our code that we want to execute. And in this case, this is the one place in the course where this is something that would be allowed, right? We normally don't do this kind of thing in Java. We say, hey, we're just going to sort of bring it all down. We're just going to terminate the whole app with an exit code of 0, which means everything went well. Everything's okay. Exit code 0 means we're cool. That exit code can be tested. If you did a command line version, for instance, you can test the exit code to see when it came back from the command line call, and you can test that in the operating system to see if it exited okay. We don't care. We just have to use exit something. We're going to use exit 0 because that means everything's cool. There's all the code for it right there. It's called an anonymous inner class. And then, of course, we don't usually space it out quite that much, right? You can collapse all these things down, but I've been very careful to try to space it in a way that makes some sense. Because when you start collapsing all of these closed things down, then all of a sudden it looks like this, right? I'm just going to show you. And then your eyes are just like, what? What? 2 closed curlies and a closed parentheses and a semicolon, what? that makes no sense to my brain. So I'll do it in baby steps so that we see, oh yeah, that goes with that, that goes with that, that goes with that. Okay. So there is a lot less overhead here, right? There's a lot less overhead. If we really need to make every button or every widget sort of have a one-off kind of behavior, it's a lot easier to write this code. It saves us from creating this whole class. Now, when you compile, if you look at the bytecode, it did in fact make a class. It just named it with some number thing like that we don't care about, but it did save us from making this whole class, and it saved us from creating a separate object of that class. It did it all in this one little strange package. This is called an anonymous inner class. Yeah, Ben, go ahead.
So can you, just because I'm curious, can you alt enter on the new action listener part that's grayed out?
Yes, so the question is, could you, like, when you're at this point, right? Could you alt enter
No,
and
no, 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 like just sorry, go back to where it was. Because I feel like this is very similar to a lambda expression.
it is
Um,
not a lambda though, right? There's
okay.
no lambda expression coding, right? Because otherwise we'd see an arrow, right? We'd see
Yeah.
some other things. So this is definitely not a lambda, but it is similar in that there are a bunch of inferences made, right?
So it's gonna, but like I feel like, so why is that new action listener grayed out? Is that just because if we,
Uh, can be replaced, yeah. So what it's telling you is if you'd like, you can replace it with a lambda,
oh, okay.
right? But you don't have to, and I wouldn't for now, unless you're going to tell me that you understand lambdas and can explain it in your code to me, right? This is perfectly good. Yep.
So it's anonymous because we don't know, and we don't really care what it's.
Because you haven't named the class,
Okay.
right? You've actually written all of the code for the class without naming it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's bizarre, right? It is a bizarre